This morning, we meet a man who has written a memoir about being a physician and reckoning with the brutal and at times dehumanizing conditions of life in the medical field as a black man. Anthony Chin-Quee weaves together his accounts of emergency operations, an abusive work culture, and his own battles with depression during his medical residency into a narrative that is unflinching, uncensored, and utterly inspiring. The result is an account of how the road to self forgiveness is paved by honesty and insight. Anthony Chin-Quee is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon with degrees from Harvard and Emory University Schools of Medicine. He says he may look like a traditional success story at first glance, yet the truth is far more complicated. The new book, I Can't Save You, a memoir, is now out from Riverhead, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Anthony Chin-Quee to the roundtable this morning. Anthony, thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely. Great to meet you, Joe.
Very nice to meet you. So what brought you to want to tell the story and to tell it, well, quite frankly, so publicly?
Well, I think it began when I was actually in the middle of my training. It's actually a part of the book, more towards the middle of the book, actually, as well, where I was just really in a tough place. And, not just having trouble with the job itself and kind of beaten down by the job, but also just my mental and emotional health was really suffering. I was in the middle of a pretty bad depression and just trying to scratch my way out of it. And, I had to figure out a reason to kind of keep going, and, in a moment of clarity I had during that time, I was able to remember that, once upon a time, I really loved telling stories, in any medium. I loved music, I loved acting, I loved writing, I loved singing, all that stuff that had kind of gotten beaten out of me by my choice of occupation. And so I had a version of training in medicine that I hadn't really seen in many physicians' memoirs, at least as I'd experienced it. I hadn't seen it told kind of honestly and brutally and disgustingly, as I'd experienced it. I decided, let me try my hand at telling that story myself.
A lot of letters, a lot of vowels for the type of doctor you are, but basically an ear, nose, and throat surgeon.
Correct. Yeah, we're called otolaryngologists.
Oh, okay. Knowing I could probably never pull that off, I will. I'm going to go with ear, nose, and ENT, if you don't mind.
ENT, perfect.
What brought you to that field and wanting to? You went to Harvard. You went to Emory School of Medicine. What was it that resonated with you that was what you wanted to do with your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think every doctor has a moment in med school where they're trying to figure out, like, kind of what type of doctor you want to be. And for me, and I think for many doctors, it's as much about what you enjoy as what you can't stand. And so I knew, like, halfway through med school that surgery was something I really wanted to do. I just liked, the immediate gratification of, being able to, fix the problem, cut something out or sew something back together and people are going to feel better. But it was just what type of surgery? There's all sorts of different types. And for me, I thought ENT was really some of the most complex and interesting stuff. I mean, you're operating on the moneymaker for a lot of people, their faces, right, their throats, their noses, their ears. And I happen to be a person who doesn't mind phlegm and, bad breath and snot and earwax. And I don't mind the top half excretions. When we get to the bottom half, of the body excretions, that's
Yeah.
where I draw the line.
Different story. When did you
Yeah.
start to notice that you were dipping into depression? You talk about in the book you grew up in a family with a background of depression
Mhm.
and struggling with relationships. But when was it that you felt, okay, this is something I really need to get a handle on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it dawned on me that not only did I have depression, but that it was more of a chronic situation for me. That didn't really dawn on me until well into my medical training. I'd had issues and little moments in my not little moments, big moments in my past before medical training where you know I got really down and you know, really was in a precarious depression state. But, once I got into training, I realized that, depression is way more than those moments where you're just catatonically in crisis. There's so much more to, the way you kind of live your life, the choices that you make, the people you bring around you, the alcohol you drink and the drugs you try. There's so much more to, that chronic condition that can serve as warning signs for you if you know where to look. But most of the time we don't, and I sure didn't. As I didn't realize they were harbingers for kind of bringing me closer and closer to the edge. And it's only kind of once I hit a rock bottom, like really dangerous suicidal depression in the middle of training, that I was able to kind of take stock and look back at not just how I was feeling at the time, but all the things that got me there.
You describe yourself in the book as not white, mostly black, and questionably Asian. How much did that play into the isolation and the depression? Uh,
Um, well, I think that, you know, yeah, I have a fun, cultural and racial identity, but for all intents and purposes, I'm a black man. That's how I've always identified. I'm a black man with a Chinese last name, which connects me kind of to my Jamaican and Chinese roots. But I would say that, race doesn't really, objectively factor into, you know, having episodes of depression, but issues surrounding race and your context definitely can. And so, I was in a discipline and a profession where I was in the extreme minority. Like, I think the numbers, year to year say that there are usually somewhere around 10,000 EMTs in the country working, and only 100 of them at any time are black, and even fewer of them are black men. And so, I was in this situation where, I'm in an extreme minority, and, there's lots of really insidious and silent ways in which, you're discriminated against when you're in that extreme of a minority. And those, things that happen to you, I'm sure lots of people who are extreme minorities in their field can relate. There's a lot of silent attacks on you. It's nothing that can be proven. It's people aren't exactly, helping you to fail, but they're not helping you to succeed where they help other people to succeed. Or, you think that they're talking about you behind your back, but you never prove it. It's just in the looks and the way conversations end abruptly when you walk into rooms. And so, that sort of all those feelings serve to make you feel really isolated, one, and two, make you feel like you're going crazy. And so that definitely doesn't help, especially when you have a brain that's prone to, kind of depression and that sort of instability. that sort of isolation as a result of, racial injustices in your occupation definitely doesn't help matters.
And you found that writing and sharing your story was very helpful in dealing with your mental health.
Yeah, and I think that my goal, every author I talk to says don't write a book as therapy, and I totally agree with that. I didn't write the book in order to sort myself out. In order to write the book, I had to sort myself out first,
Yeah.
and that means I had to be on my medication regularly. I had to go to my therapist and really do a lot of work so that when I was writing this book, I wasn't writing it as a diary. I was writing it as something for other people, so that hopefully it's accessible enough that other people who may be going through similar times can see some of their own experiences in there and maybe feel a little bit less alone.
When you think about that, and ultimately that power, and the power of truth and sharing that truth, did you then, as you say, sorting things out, did you know where you wanted to end up professionally and even personally, of what the goals were, or was it just to stay on the path?
I think I started writing and started conceiving of the book in order to stay on the path. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew that it would lead me to something different than what I'd been taught by my colleagues was available to me. Like, a lot of my colleagues go on to work in what we call academic medicine, and they do a lot of research, and they work in hospitals, and they're teaching residents and writing papers and all that sort of stuff, going to the OR, going to clinic, just that's the cycle. And I knew for me, if I did that with my life for the rest of, for the next 20 years, I would, it would kill me eventually. And so I knew I wanted to do something different with my experience. I just didn't know what it was. And I was hoping that starting this journey of writing this book would help to steer me along the right path.
Therapy is a part of the story. Talk about the role the therapy played for you in sorting things out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, if I can make a plug for everybody to go to therapy at some point or another, I definitely will. Because, even if you're not dealing with, diagnosed mental illness, there's so much that we each struggle to learn about ourselves, about our identities, about who we are, what we want. And those struggles are kind of, based on how we grew up and who our families are and who we are at our core. And it can be really difficult to find the right questions to ask yourself in order to navigate through all those questions and kind of become the version of yourself that you always wanted to be. And so, not every therapist is right for every person. I had to shop around for, the right one who I felt understood me and I felt comfortable with. But, once I found the right person, and it took years of going to therapy on and off, once I found the right person who understood the progress I wanted to make, wasn't afraid to ask me tough questions and have me tap into feelings and experiences and, all sorts of other ways in which my stress and my trauma kind of invaded my body. I felt so grateful. And, I continued for once to go to therapy, not just when I was in crisis, but when I was feeling okay. Because that's where I was really able to do the valuable work that lasted, as opposed to just doing it when I was super depressed and just needed to figure out how to get out of bed every day.
When you finished the project, even though you had things sorted out, when you finished writing the book, was it relief, or was it look that literally that, okay, this chapter of my life is up there on the shelf?
It was definitely some relief, and I think the book itself, when folks read it, you'll see, I feel like it's a happy ending, but it's a bittersweet happy ending,
Right.
And I a lot of the book, a lot of the journey has to do with me finding my identity and separating that identity from a lot of the lessons I learned and ran away from that I got from my father. And when I finally, put the pen down and, sent the book out to the publisher, there was definitely a lot of relief, and I wasn't nervous about sharing all the intimate details of my life with other people. I was just, really thankful that I'd managed to do it, and really hopeful that, other people would find, some value in my experiences, and hopefully there's some degree of universality in what I wrote down.
Did the move to England help?
The move to England has been wonderful. It's actually pretty. Our circumstances are pretty fun. So my wife decided to leave her profession. She was also a medical professional, and wanted to move to Europe to get a master's in archaeology. And so she wanted to completely start over, and I absolutely wanted to do that with her. And so moving to England has really been kind of a breath of fresh air, especially, kind of given a lot of the stressors, both, political and, racial and cultural that we were kind of struggling with in the States, that I think a lot of people struggle with in the States. We were able to move someplace else and kind of get a little bit of distance from that, and kind of get a bit of a fresh start, though that I can admit, even though I've loved it, it does kind of come with a caveat, because, we're still Americans, and I care about all of the things that go on in America. I care about the experience of Black people in America, and I often think, how can I best, make my impact with the people that I identify so well with and want to look out for? Can I do that when I've gone so far away? And I'm hoping that with my writing, that can be one way that I can do that.
The name of the new book is I Can't Save You. It is published by Riverhead Books. It's a memoir by Anthony Chin-Quee. Anthony, thank you very much for sharing with us this morning. I so appreciate your honesty and openness.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, the name of the book is I Can't Save You by Anthony Chin-Quee. You're listening to The Roundtable.